There comes a moment in life when everything familiar shatters, the job falls through, the relationship crumbles, the dream evaporates, and in that moment, when you're left standing there with empty hands and a heavy heart, it's easy to believe the story is over, that the breaking was the final act, that God has gone silent or maybe just stepped away. But the truth, my friend, is that the breaking was never the end. It was the doorway, the threshold, the sacred beginning of becoming. We are conditioned to fear the breaking, to resent it, to pray it away. But what if, just what if, the thing that cracked your soul wide open was the very thing designed to bring you home to yourself? What if that collapse wasn't the death of your purpose, but the excavation of it? You see, we tend to think God moves only in the beautiful, in the strong, in the polished and pristine, but that's not how transformation happens. The seed doesn't sprout unless it splits. The dawn doesn't rise unless the night ends. And gold doesn't shine unless it's passed through fire. It's uncomfortable, yes, and it hurts deeply. But here's the paradox. Sometimes the most divine act of love is letting something fall apart, because in our brokenness, we become available, our walls fall, our pride quiets, the noise subsides, and in that sacred silence, we finally hear the whisper we've been running from. You were never meant to do this alone. It's in those dark nights of the soul when every answer escapes us, when the why won't come, and when even hope feels offensive, that something begins to stir, a soft awakening, a flicker, a recognition, not of what's been lost, but of who's been with us all along. We come to see that what broke us, exposed us, it peeled back the layers we built to protect ourselves and revealed something raw, honest, and unfiltered: our need, our longing, our humanity. And from that place, God begins to shape us, not as we wish to be, but as we truly are, not according to the image we try to project to the world, but according to the deeper truth that's been buried beneath all our efforts to seem okay. There, in the dust of what used to be, we meet grace, not grace as a concept, but grace as an encounter, as breath, as presence, as the subtle but undeniable feeling that maybe, just maybe, this breaking had a purpose all along. The world tells you to fix yourself, to get up, smile, and move on. But God says, let me sit with you in the wreckage. Let me rebuild with you, not in spite of your brokenness, but through it. The parts of you that feel shattered beyond repair. That's where the light gets in. That's where the miracle begins. We don't often realize it in the moment, but if you trace the arc of your life, if you look closely, not just with your eyes, but with your soul, you'll see that some of the most important chapters began the day something else ended. You'll see how what looked like devastation was actually invitation, an invitation to evolve, to surrender, to remember who you are. You were not broken to be abandoned. You were broken to be reformed, not as a copy of who you were, but as someone entirely new, stronger, softer, wiser. Someone who knows that pain is not a punishment, but a passage. And that the breaking wasn't a sign of your weakness. It was proof that something greater was breaking through. Because when the ego shatters, the soul emerges. And that, my friends, is where everything changes. So don't curse the breaking. Don't resist it. For in time, it will reveal itself not as the end of your story, but as the chapter that made the rest of it worth reading. And the beautiful thing is this: when you finally stop trying to glue the pieces back together, you'll realize that they were never meant to fit the old frame. Pain has this strange way of showing up uninvited. It doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. It just bursts through the door and sits itself down right in the center of your life. And when it does, our first instinct is to recoil, to run, to question why a loving God would allow such weight to fall upon our shoulders. We look to the skies and whisper, or sometimes shout, "Why me?" But what if pain wasn't meant to be an enemy? What if it's not a punishment, but a passage, not a curse, but a compass? You see, pain speaks in a language deeper than words. It doesn't communicate through logic. It moves through the body, through the spirit, in those quiet hours when no one else is around and the noise of the world fades. It doesn't come to destroy, it comes to reveal. And while we may not understand it at first, while it may seem cruel or senseless in the moment, pain always brings with it a message not of despair, but of awakening. We tend to think of God as someone who exists only in joy, in clarity, in moments of peace. But if you look closely, if you really lean in, you'll realize that some of your most divine encounters came not when everything was going right, but when everything was falling apart. Because pain creates space. Space to listen, space to feel, space to meet yourself in a way you never have before. It strips away the illusions. It silences the noise. And in that raw, uncomfortable stillness, something holy starts to stir. The problem is we're taught to see pain as a sign of distance from God, as though hardship means we've taken a wrong turn. But maybe, just maybe, the presence of pain is not the absence of God. It's the presence of process. Maybe it means you're on the verge of transformation, because only something real can hurt and only something sacred can stretch. Pain doesn't come to shame you. It doesn't show up to say you're unworthy or forgotten. It arrives to prepare you, to carve out deeper wells of compassion, to soften the parts of you that have gone rigid with survival, to open you up to the love you once believed you had to earn. It's not punishment, it's invitation. Think about it. How many times has a painful experience forced you to grow in ways you never would have chosen on your own? How many times has it led you to people, places, or truths that forever altered the course of your life? We rarely volunteer for discomfort, but it has a way of shaping us into someone truer than who we thought we had to be. And yes, it hurts. It's supposed to, growth is not sterile. Transformation is not tidy. A butterfly doesn't emerge without struggle. A seed doesn't sprout without pressure. You too are becoming something beyond what you can currently see. And that process can feel like breaking, but it's not breaking down, it's breaking open. So the next time pain visits you, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Because pain is not your enemy, it's your teacher. And when you stop running from it, when you dare to sit with it, listen to it, learn from it, you'll find that it doesn't speak of punishment, but of preparation, of purpose, of the deep and divine reordering that happens when the soul is ready to expand. What broke your heart may have been the very thing that opened it. And perhaps in the end, pain's message was never to wound you, but to wake you. We live in a world obsessed with speed. Everything is instant: messages, meals, decisions. And somewhere along the way, we've taken that mindset and projected it onto God, expecting divine timing to move with human urgency. So when something doesn't happen right away, when prayers hang in the air without answers, we start to wonder if the silence means abandonment. But just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not happening at all. Delay, as uncomfortable as it may feel, is not the same as denial. There's a strange kind of faith required in the waiting room of life, a faith that dares to trust, not because things look promising, but because something deeper within you whispers, hold on, not yet, but soon. And this, perhaps, is one of the most difficult places to be when you've done all you can, when your hands are open, your heart surrendered, and still nothing moves. The doors stay closed. The opportunities vanish. The people you thought would stay leave. And it's in these moments we start writing stories in our heads. Maybe God forgot. Maybe I missed my moment. Maybe I'm not enough. But none of these are true. In fact, the very opposite is often the case. When God delays, it's not because he's unsure of what to do with you. It's because he sees the whole picture while we're only holding a puzzle piece. It's like planting a seed. You bury it in the dark earth, you water it, tend to it, and wait. But for a time, it looks like nothing is happening, just soil and silence. But underneath, something is stirring. The roots are taking shape. The ground is being broken from within. That hidden work, the kind you can't see, is what prepares the seed to eventually rise. And if you rushed it, if you dug it up too soon, you'd miss the miracle in the making. The same is true for your life. What looks like delay is often deep preparation. You're being strengthened in the quiet, sharpened in the stillness, protected from things you didn't even know could harm you. You may think you're ready, but God's delay says, not just ready for now, ready for forever. Because sometimes he withholds not to punish you, but to protect you from settling for less than what was promised. We often pray for breakthrough, for success, for clarity, and those things will come, but divine timing operates outside of our clocks and calendars. It doesn't show up according to our deadlines. It shows up when the heart, the moment, and the purpose are fully aligned. That alignment may take time, but it's never wasted. It's sacred. You are not being punished in your waiting. You are being trusted with it. There is something you're becoming in the space between the promise and the fulfillment, a patience, a resilience, a depth that can't be formed in ease. And if you look back, you'll likely see that the things you once cried over, the seasons you once questioned, now make perfect sense because they brought you here not just to a new destination, but to a new dimension of who you are. And so if you're in that place right now where the prayers feel unanswered and the path feels unclear, breathe. You're not forgotten. You're being finely tuned, like an instrument waiting for the right moment in the symphony. Your part is coming. And when it does, it will not be rushed or forced. It will be right. And the timing will feel like grace wrapped in precision. Sometimes what feels like God's silence is actually his craftsmanship. And when the moment finally arrives, you'll understand why it had to take the time that it did. It's strange how the things that break us, those deeply personal, private battles, often feel like the very things we need to hide. We cover up the scars, polish the pain, and present ourselves to the world as if nothing ever touched us too deeply. But the truth is, what wounded you might be the very thing the world needs from you. The things you thought disqualified you, disfigured you, or left you beyond repair, those are the very parts of your story that carry power. And not just power for you, but power for someone else. There's a peculiar kind of beauty in realizing that your struggle wasn't just about you. That what nearly broke you will someday speak life into someone else's darkest night. It's a quiet, sacred reversal. You go from asking, why me, to whispering, now I see, not because the pain disappears, but because it begins to take on meaning. And when pain gains meaning, it stops being a prison. It becomes a platform. Every experience you've endured, the heartbreak, the loss, the failures that made you question your worth, they weren't random. They were chapters of a much bigger story. And not just a story you're living, but one you're meant to give away. That betrayal you never talk about, someone out there is carrying the same wound, hoping they're not alone. That diagnosis, that season of depression, that silent struggle you thought no one else could understand, someone needs to hear how you came through it. Not polished, not perfect, but present, still standing. You don't need to preach. Just live it. Let your life be the evidence. Let your scars be the sermon. The world doesn't need more untouchable examples of perfection. It needs truth. It needs vulnerability. It needs people who've walked through fire and aren't afraid to show the smoke on their clothes. That's what connects us. That's what heals us. Not pretending we've always been strong, but admitting that we broke and still found a way forward. There's a kind of spiritual alchemy that happens when pain is shared, when we stop hoarding our stories out of shame and start offering them as light. And the more you give away what once hurt you, the lighter it becomes. Your story softens someone else's suffering. Your courage makes space for someone else's breakthrough. You see, what the enemy meant to silence in you, God will use to awaken others. That very thing that brought you to your knees is what will give you authority to help others rise. That is the irony of the divine. The wound becomes the wisdom. The loss becomes the lesson. The burden becomes the bridge. And slowly you begin to realize this didn't happen to me. It happened through me for a reason bigger than me. So if you're still carrying the weight of what broke you, thinking it has no place in your future, look again. You are not defined by your pain, but you are shaped by it. And in the hands of the divine, nothing is wasted. Not a single tear, not a single moment. All of it is woven into something that can reach others in ways you never imagined. You don't have to wait until you're fully healed to help. Sometimes it's the person with the limp who knows the safest way through the valley, because when the light finally returns, and it will, You won't just be a survivor. You'll be a beacon. There's a certain finality that comes with loss. When something we built, something we loved, trusted, poured ourselves into, falls apart, we tend to believe it's over for good, that the best parts of life were in the past, that what we had was as good as it gets, and that what's broken will stay broken. But what if what you thought was the end wasn't the end at all? What if that collapse, that unraveling, was the exact moment when something far greater began to take shape? See, we often want restoration to mean getting back what we lost. We want things to go back to how they were before the storm. But the divine rarely works in reverse. You're not being taken back, you're being taken beyond, because the purpose of the breaking wasn't to return you to where you were. It was to prepare you for where you've never been. God doesn't restore us to our former condition. He reshapes us into something altogether new. It's not like gluing together a shattered vase and hoping it looks decent again. No, it's more like melting the fragments down to create something that couldn't have existed any other way. A new shape, a new strength, a new story, and sometimes the most powerful things are born in the ruins. We just don't recognize them right away, because when you're in the middle of the wreckage, all you see is what's missing. All you feel is what's gone, but beneath the surface, something is quietly being rebuilt. Not a replica of what was, but a reimagining of what could be. Think of the moments in your life that felt like absolute dead ends, the closed doors, the missed chances, the relationships that dissolved when you thought they would last forever. At the time, it felt like failure. But looking back, wasn't there always something waiting just around the bend that you never could have imagined from where you were standing? The loss made room, the disappointment cleared the space, and it's in that space, uncomfortable, uncertain, that the seeds of something greater were planted. You're not being punished. You're being positioned, and the difference is everything. There's a passage that says, God gives beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Notice it doesn't say he gives back the ashes polished. It says he gives beauty for them. In exchange, he doesn't patch up the old. He replaces it with something better. You're not going to just recover. You're going to rise. But you have to be willing to release the version of your life you thought was perfect. Because often, it's not the loss itself that holds us back. It's our refusal to let go of what it was supposed to be. We cling to the blueprint, the plan, the expectation, and as long as we grip that tightly, we can't receive what's next. The truth is, some things needed to fall apart, not because you failed, but because they were too small for what you're meant to carry. And sometimes God allows the shaking, the pruning, the stripping away, not to diminish you, but to clear the ground for something more enduring to grow. Something that can actually hold the weight of who you're becoming. So if you find yourself walking through the ruins right now, don't despair. Don't mistake the silence for absence or the stillness for stagnation. What looks like death may just be the soil of resurrection, and what feels like an ending may be the threshold of something sacred and new. Because in the economy of the divine, nothing is wasted and nothing is returned as it was. It's always pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And sometimes, when it looks like you've lost everything, you've actually just made room for everything that matters. There's a moment, often quiet, often unexpected, when the chaos starts to make sense. Not all at once, not in a flash of lightning or a sudden epiphany, but slowly, subtly, like the sun rising behind a thick fog. You look back at everything you've walked through, the pain, the delays, the unanswered questions, the heartbreaks that nearly undid you, and something begins to shift. Not because the circumstances change, but because you do, and then it hits you, not in your mind, but in your spirit. Oh, that's why it had to happen that way. You start to see how a silence was never abandonment, it was alignment. You realize the pain didn't come to destroy you, it came to unlock you. Every moment that left you feeling confused, abandoned, forgotten, suddenly begins to form a pattern, a design, a path. The puzzle pieces start clicking into place, and what once looked like fragments now looks like a mosaic, beautiful, messy, honest, real. We spend so much of our lives fighting what we can't understand, trying to make sense of the senseless, demanding answers in the middle of the storm, but meaning rarely arrives in the middle. It arrives at the edge when you've come through it, not untouched, but transformed. And maybe the truth is, it couldn't make sense back then because you weren't ready to understand it yet. We assume clarity is an intellectual thing, something we think our way into. But divine clarity is felt more than it's understood. It arrives through lived experience, through surrender, through time. It comes when we stop wrestling with life and start allowing it, when we stop demanding an explanation and begin trusting that even the chaos is working in our favor. That doesn't mean you'll have all the answers. No one really does. But you'll carry a different kind of knowing, a peace that doesn't depend on control, a stillness that holds even in uncertainty. You won't need to explain every detail. You'll just know that none of it was wasted. That heartbreak that seemed pointless, it cracked you open in a way nothing else could. That delay that nearly broke your spirit, it saved you from rushing into something not meant for you. That door that slammed shut, it redirected your feet toward a life far better than the one you were forcing. And all the while, even when you thought you were walking alone, there was something greater at work, guiding, shaping, rearranging. What once felt like divine silence now begins to sound like orchestration, not random notes, but a score being written with care. You were never off track. You were never behind. You were being refined. And suddenly the weight lifts. The striving fades. You stop trying to fix the past or force the future and begin to live in the grace of now. Because now is where meaning lives. Now is where peace begins. And now is where you see that the breaking, the waiting, the wondering, it was never the end of the story. It was the necessary unfolding of it. You were not forgotten. You were being formed. Every detour was direction. Every delay was protection. And everything that once made no sense at all was simply waiting for the moment your soul could finally recognize the masterpiece it was becoming. Because this is the unveiling, the moment the dust settles, the moment your eyes adjust, the moment you see not just where you've been, but where you were always meant to go. And that, dear one, is the kind of clarity only time, trust, and a touch of the divine can deliver. The storm never took you off course. It carried you home.